There you all are. Once again, I'm James Sherry, curator of the December-January Reading Series. Today, we're going to hear from two political poets writing from opposite poles of the fictions thereof. I first published Peter Inman in 1977 in Roof 4. He came with a group of DC poets that Bruce Andrews suggested, but Peter's work stood out for its use of fractions of language rather than only the fragments of postmodernism, as well as for his lettrism and address to politics through language. For this reading, he sent me part of his work Decker, which I think was in Redshift from 1988. And I'm going to try to share this with you so you can see what it looks like. So there you can see a stanza from this piece from Decker. Hornbowl, Alec, Paulist, each road endless from it. Or more recently, in a more recent piece, Angus, Naft, Bluff, Pith, Nowell. Now I have to figure out how to go back. So here you hear how the fractional words and fragments of writing compose into a whole, like memory, or how much, what part of what we might actually know of all that's happening. Peter wrote me that he's going to read 6+5 pieces from Webern, referring, I think, to the 5 pieces for orchestra by Webern, of which Schoenberg said, there are no motives in this piece which have to be brought to the fore. Sounds a lot like Peter's work. Yet I have to write something to justify showing my face here, something to bring to the fore. So all this anti-referential tropism is just a hint of how things might go away if we're not looking directly. Or in the political frame, will not be allowed to show themselves in their inherency. The oppression of labor, suffering from race, and the stigma attached to non-binary relations that we're continuously engaging in our social lives and daily thoughts. These fractions and fragments, what Dan Farrell called flitting signifiers, resist interpretation at the same time that they attract us to use our interpretive habits. But I don't see them as simply phonemes or sound bites. Now we call them bytes, the 8-bit words RAM choose. Rather, I see them as expanding what can be semantic, an assessment, looking up, down, sideways, and diagonally of what we're given to see of the situations we're in, which is how Inman gets into politics, because no one person makes that something alone. Since poetry is a group activity, composed of fractions, fragments, memories, views, multiple individuals, group identities, processes, languages, and their components with both their public and private implications, interpretations and misinterpretations, together in poems, books, collections of writers, as I say every week, a taxonomy more than an evaluation of what's going on around us. Or as Peter says, quote, all of life may be lank matted towns in idges, Canada forgotten in paragraphs. Or as Ben Friedlander says of Inman, quote, if a pin falls in language where no one can pronounce it, it simply reverberates. P. Inman's writing is poetry precisely and moreover because reverberal. And Peter's inscriptions of how to portray, draw, and echo what goes on the page is this reading we're now going to have for ourselves by Peter Inman.
First of all, thanks, James, for that introduction. I agree with a lot of it. There'd be some talk about parsing it further, but I get much of what you said does apply to my work. And in terms of the politics in the work, there are some blatantly political works that I do, so that's not always the case that I hide the politics, but I think most of it is basically keeping the field of discourse and society as open as it can be, which is particularly hard right now. So thank you very much for that introduction. And I want to thank you for all the work you've done down through the years, publishing Roof and doing the Segue. Part of that, I know you've supported my work and I'm very appreciative of that, but I also know that that would go for everybody probably, looking at your series. And then I wanted to just do a shout out for an English guy named James Davies. He's from Manchester and he's published my last 3 books. And he's been very supportive. I think you guys might want to check out his If P Then Q site, and there's a lot of interesting stuff there, including Miles Champion, for instance, has been published by him. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to be reading from 3 books. First is Red Shift. That's by me and it's published by James Sherry, a Roof book in 1988, I think. Yeah, I'm just going to read one part actually of one piece from there, and James referred to that in his text, Decker. And then I'm going to read from 2 books, Ad Infinitum, which is James's If P Then Q, and then the latest book, Scratches, that looks like this. It's the cover. That sort of got intercepted by the disease. So that's still a very new book. This is the first time I'll be reading anything from it because of medical events. Okay, Decker for Tina Dara. And the only thing I'll say about this is part of what's going on here is on a given page, there are actually 3 pages. So it's pages within pages. It's when I was trying to figure out what's the difference between a book and a page and a series and that kind of stuff. Okay. Decker for Tina. Mute, think, off, bleed. Page 1. Daughter chicory, hem off key. Eyes, drag, dinkt. Page 3. Diff, earth. Page 4. Meeb, egg. Seabed off it thigh, chalk prine, noun cement, woman, spoiori. Page 6. Sentence, jitterty. And odd down edges so. Page 9. Poor blown to sentences. Page 10. Whitecap Iction, broken monitors. Glacis errata, traction, hazel sign. Page 12. Seat, dredge, clay, moise, clings, ply dime, spatter tharwa, auk, dry drews. No is book Ushin. This is a book. This is a poem from the book Ad Infinitum. It's entitled Angus, and it's an Irish word. Basically, Angus is on the Aran Islands. I forget which one. I think it might be Inisheer. And on that particular island, there's a ruined fort, a site of a ruined fort, and that in itself was not why we were there. We were there for the rather fantastic view of the Atlantic Ocean. It basically, the fort was basically on a cliff. It ended very quickly and abruptly, so you had to be careful. And there below was the ocean. So this is Angus. A naft bluff. Pisnau. Val Sarbo laced if Nipur. Croft Vitin length aniset pages. Ocean Inents Evasp a quo. Okay, and this was, as it happens, this was also referenced in James's introduction. Here. Excuse me for a second. It's called 6 + 5 pieces from Webern, parentheses 2015, 2017. I actually had 2 cracks at this, and the first crack was 6 poems, and the second crack was 5. Basically, it's a tribute to Anton Webern, who, along with Thelonious Monk, I guess, were the first really serious musicians in terms of my taking music seriously. So I will read, I think it's 6 of those pieces, and the opuses, or opusize, whatever plural of opuses, are actually works that numerically determined sometimes the amount of words in the particular poem, sometimes the amount of letters, sometimes the titles of the pieces themselves. I could not tell you which was ruling a given page at this point. Okay, Opus 11. 3 little pieces. Plem light. Texture possum. Lipe plus. Opus 16. Where was it of a book? Opus 17. All of Lake Superior in a beige here pause, written as a landscape, cobble quanta, crag glimpse, not there of her work of tone wool, tan footnote sheer. 18. Squinch, mamorph, episc. 22. Tiapol, imiters, period. Opus 30. thinking Stein upside down. Someone where the applesauce put it. What knots to a landscape's hair. Okay, we're still in my latest book, Scratches. This piece is called Dreamtime. It refers to Aboriginal Dreamtime, which could be looked at psychologically, sociologically, or religiously, whatever aspect you were taking of it. What I was surprised at was when I got into a little of seeing what Dreamtime meant, was its relationship to Benjamin's view of time, which was the messianic time aspect of Benjamin's work, Benjamin, I should say. Okay, so this is Dreamtime. Wasps on salt, desert as the end of itself. Layers about talking points, some patterned termites, periods in past it all. Itch, etch. Field with dashes on end, mound set, spouch. It as a lost count, talk made of old seabed. It was thinking him in it. Not the adjective itself, but its beginning line through. Frost left of it. Its length, putty. Its buffalo, etra. There was a line down the middle. There was no middle. There was no outside to it. It rained, it evaporated, it stopped afterwards, backwards. No syntax, only levels. At a briefing's length, at a some weight of skein, at the evil of it, at the even of it. Lint, scribble, bold, mice. Women traded into language. All the all of a Maine vanilla. Smallpox yet. Vect versa. Wiped dune, square, weight, slackened vasp. Weather as a distance, alphabet of a sudden. What was it expanding into? What was the built salt of it? The bleached, needless purr, a name with wasp in it as a word, inkling twitch, bumped everything. Did they die of a circular arrangement, blood type made of rock? All of it but Europe ends between by evaporation, all of accryption, all the far named in none. Thought ilst. His name in brain, its of upon, leaked crinkle, earth beyond prose, exculpa, that struck out. Okay, then also from this book, Elk's Breath. No pattern in this, I'm just going to jump into it. Elk's Breath. Light in acres, set afoot glimpses, S's. Preposition the less which of those should touch. Tant pis, ant piss, mightn't of Kerouac writ by stilled age, a distance, voir, royal, dire the red, time in relation to almost being nature, vowel clouds as built suit. What noun? Footsteps. Settled German prose, large inks, all of life, maybe lank, matted Townsend. Idges, Canada forgotten in paragraphs. Would that such gab as the whiskey ever lined through? Limp imbles, noise off. Sequas, color Ella. Cabot, Anid, so-and-so minuous. It was of cooked salt, it was syllable bearing, put milk in tinct inkling, raisin of, talks till into upright, no wit of noun to it, but in abidances, gums, words lost, pesters. Figment grain, sound but fiori. Discard money relationship. Discarded money relationship, each of the speech to a potato, each of noun gerund aporia, lem of rose. Insofar, Sherpa. Was at a freckle still eth, but it could at her own p-inch ago, the other as maroon, as nequal, as shown wane episteme bleakened enough. Weld nose, Welt Geld. Beaches print the length red hairs. How sudden the coffee is, how pronoun Albuquerque. Singleton, hillock, apoth. Inked data, loosen ints, light waves of come to's glimp, fluv, length, nonces, hem of iotin, ood, and narrated quotes. Irks, elk's breath, and ilsp, some bowl, the bulk of a church, a goose name, opag ch. Then French, a foot about apples, some canticle made of horse. Isle litmus, isthmus, inesp, work piece, words put a distance dot at fjord mouth, to thought from germ tine vowel, put Quebec cliffs, Inuk noit, it leask, how cord broken. Man in spectacles, taking notes the while that Iceland took. The moors so thin as to where I was, that L's in vermilion apostrophe put to speak. Haute bois, pencil settles, round film. The noon taken of her name, the irony to pronounce ocean after, add decimal, not a resin pending, but a latch. But hair peppers, finicked crags, it's all even matter, imptions. Lighthouse nosed to do with, equat inundra. Okay, and back for this one. And I think that'll be my time, I'm not really sure. This is called Ilu 2. It's also from Ad Infinitum. I should mention that there's a collected called written that is published by Pete and Q. It's a doorstopper. It's a big book. But if you're really interested in my work, that would be a good way to go if you didn't have a lot of it. LU2, Stardust, Iceball, Ren Anonymy, Main of Book Peaks, Her V-line, Literature's Last Alone, Off-Eyed, Black Twice, Cellar Liffey, Whitenst, Stead Ill, Bolt Vith Egg, Iraq's Arun. That's one of my favorite poems. It's 5 pages, 5 words or non-words. It's not actually collected in anything, but collected, was never published before. Quogue, Q-U-O-G-U. You Long Islanders may be acquainted with that. Quogue, Long Island, somewhere in close to Montauk, I believe. Quogue, Og, Awk, Quippa, Plinth, Figmemp. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That was great. Now let's take a 5-minute intermission, during which we'll ask you to donate $5 to the readers. And remember that all donations go to pay the poets. So take a 5-minute break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, and thank you for your donations. As always, all contributions to the Segue Reading Series go directly to pay the poets. So please, if you haven't donated already, do so at the end of the program. We'll post the payment methods again after the show. And now, on to our second reader of the afternoon. In her new Roof book, Unsolved Mysteries, Marie Buck collects a group of short prose pieces that mash up stories from the television show Unsolved Mysteries, hosted originally by Robert Stack, and her reminiscences growing up in rural South Carolina. Marie's work unravels not only the mysteries of the TV series, but also how American popular culture misrepresents the working class. The violence of the lives and deaths of people named Dexter and Carrie Lynn in the TV show inspire Buck's ambitions for social justice, revelatory sexual engagements, and hope for clarity in documenting what really happens to people, in contrast to the cleaned up versions of more commercial narratives. As Kay Gabriel, one of the curators for our next Segue Reading Series season says, quote, does Marie Buck believe in fate? She certainly believes in sin, not in the way you think. And then Kay quotes Marie. Jeff Bezos say, and his peers will have their blood spilt eternally. And when they do, Kay says, it'll look like Kool-Aid. The more overt sexual scenes, the quivering and coming, the goopy blood of a menstrual coincidence fit into stories framed by Marie's hope that some of these dead working class misfits end up in the art scene in New York. What attracted me to Marie's text was the combination of humor, deadpan, politics, and insufferable reality that we know, but want to suppress, that constitutes the condition of those who don't have white-collar jobs editing, teaching, programming, organizing. What the last 4 years has shown us is a really difficult life, persecuted by corporate shills and unsentimental theft of real people's real lives. The poem, Dream in Which You Are Ineffectively Surveilled, shows that we don't need to be afraid of the surveillance society because, quote, the joke's on them. Capitalism makes people too lonely to be surveilled. Here's her idealism coming through. If we all text each other enough, surveillance will fail. Do I think or know that's not realistic? Do I think or know that technology will eventually turn humanity itself into an unsolved mystery? I don't know. But I do agree with Marie that once everyone has exhausted themselves, our genitals will change back into crotches, to Barbie doll style, non-needy plastic hinges, allowing us to think more clearly. If I read Marie correctly, our salvation is in our being together, talking together, texting, writing, reading, and keeping in touch in spite of the diseases of body and society that isolate us from each other, as here today we come together while Marie Buck reads to us. Marie?
So thank you so much, James. Okay, so this first poem is called The Dead. All we're going to do after the revolution is document the lives of the dead. Not the dead we already know about, but the dead we don't know about. We're going to take Jeff Bezos' money, and we're going to document ourselves and our pets, all our affections, our quotidian habits. We're going to document street cats that we didn't take in because we already had pets. We're going to document, on behalf of our pets, all the toys that our pets liked and accidentally destroyed. And maybe socialism will unveil something. Maybe Jeff Bezos' money will mingle with his blood and create an effect. Maybe socialism will undo our deadness so that we might animate our archives and interact as the things we left behind. Me, for instance, as a Katamari ball of poems, but mostly emails facilitating the publication of academic articles, i.e. my day job, of bills paid, of bizarrely intimate texts with people met online, of graduate school papers about poetry I no longer like, of an embarrassing and neurotic Google history that wonders at various ages about the health of my bowels, the relative attractiveness of my genitals, the addictions of family and friends, about how to find memes that I can no longer find, about how Pasolini was killed, about the etiquette for sending sympathy notes. So that is the body that would get picked back up, and it could go around and find the others, the archives of my friends and lovers and pets from across time. I would find my childhood dogs, I would pet them. I would find the goldfish that got trapped at the top of the fish tank and cooked under the light. And when I had gotten used to things a bit and was ready, I would find my loves across time, here in the form of animated G-chats. I'd suck on the shoulders of the G-chats. I'd be really toppy with them. I'd leave them for my friends, and my friends and I would tease each other about our archive bodies, about the things we'd Googled, the way our texts fit together to create new versions of our mouths. Let's take Jeff Bezos' money and use it to live forever. I start watching Unsolved Mysteries. If you don't know it, it's a TV show from the late 80s and early 90s, and on up into the aughts, apparently, though I haven't seen those episodes. It's about various eerie phenomena, unexplained deaths, paranormal activities, lost loves, hidden treasure, lost heirs, UFOs, missing persons, etc. The categories, which at one point in the opening credits are listed across the screen in a style that makes them look like they're receding into the depths of the computer, are loose and vary from week to week. If you remember the show, you probably remember for the unexplained death segments, which mostly recount people going about their daily routines and then disappearing or turning up murdered. It is, often but not always, a serialized documentary about the violent deaths of mostly working class people, often living in rural places, whose lives would not otherwise be well documented. And like with all of us, their lives and deaths might have been otherwise. Okay. And this poem is about one of those deaths. Hot jock shot wad from Wisconsin, 1185, Saturday the 3rd. In 1985, Dexter Stefanik, a 78-year-old man, is killed while traveling from Oregon to Wisconsin. It's winter. He chooses to save time by stopping at rest stops to sleep. Hot jock shot wad from Wisconsin, 1185, Saturday the 3rd, is written on the rest stop bathroom wall. A cryptic phrase, maybe a clue. Police discover it months after they discover Dexter Stefanik's car burning, just after his body is discovered at a county dump, his shoes hanging out of a pile of garbage, his legs, his body hidden frozen within the pile. According to the internet and also to the office of Orrin Hatch, who was mocked online for using the phrase publicly in August 2017, shot your wad comes from the Civil War era and refers to shooting a plug of cloth rather than a bullet from a musket, i.e. an ineffective shot, a shot where you fucked up and wasted it. But we all know that if you write on a bathroom wall that somebody has shot their wad, you're probably referring to coming. Maybe to masturbation rather than to sex, but the musket is definitely a dick. There's even more mystery though. The dates are wrong. Dexter Stefanik's car was found burning on November 19th, 1985, not November 3rd. November 3rd then must have marked a parallel, a time split. A hot jock from Wisconsin shot his wad in the bathroom stall, possibly into the mouth of another man, possibly into the hand of another man, possibly into their own hand, wishing for a different hand, a hand that wasn't theirs and that was therefore less predictable, and that would have taken away the burden of being in control of each motion, of getting oneself to come as opposed to being made to come. Being made to come is not always better, but in a bathroom stall in Montana in the winter, I think it is better. In this scenario, someone refers to himself as hot jock, which seems surprising. Perhaps this was intended as a seed. Suggest on a bathroom wall that there is sometimes a hot jock there, and then perhaps there will be. Orrin Hatch was mocked for saying that other Republicans had shot their wad with regard to a series of defeated healthcare bills. The healthcare bills sought to make healthcare even shittier, to make life and the relationship to one's body even more difficult, so that it would be less and less likely that one could sadly or agitatedly or happily or thoughtlessly shoot one's wad in a restroom stall, and more likely that one would, like Dexter Stefanik, be kidnapped and shot twice and left at an icy garbage dump. In this world, the world in which we lose healthcare and other services even more quickly than we are, it is definitely more likely your car will be set on fire, your foot will be spotted sticking out from under an old couch, your body will no longer be animated. A friend got caught by a cop writing Bernie would have won in a rest stop bathroom. That is, casting a spell. That world would be a different world. There are many possible worlds, some better, some worse than that phrase would suggest. In one world, everyone is sad about the deaths of their loved ones, but cross-country trips do not exist. Montana does not exist. Springtime does not exist. In this world, you don't have to jerk yourself off, but you're not jerked off by anyone else either. You can touch your dick yourself, or you can thrust it into the world. And the world manifests not as loose air, but as a sloppy wet mouth, a rectum, spit-covered labial folds, a spongy warm pocket, a small calloused hand. You thrust into the world, you the hot jock, and you shoot your wad. My current favorite memory to shoot my wad to is a man pulls out to avoid coming, to keep lasting and make a game of it, but cannot help but come accidentally, sitting in front of me with his legs folded underneath him, thighs shaking, spurting into a condom without touching himself or me. Just a dick, not being touched, no longer inside of anything, quivering and filling a condom head. This man was definitely not Dexter Stefanik, since Dexter Stefanik is dead. But this man came into the ether, suggesting the possibility of a world in which Dexter Stefanik would never have died. The theory of the homunculus, a 16th century speculation about how a fetus came to be, suggested that cum was composed of tiny men, tiny little humans. So in shooting our hot wads, we're shooting out people, little men who might escape the condom, not to cream on a hand or an ass, but instead to populate the world, to fill it with tiny helper elves who would have, as Dexter Stefanik shot his wad in the rest station bathroom, left the restroom stopped the killer, a man of at least 6 feet with a pale complexion who was later seen pulling up behind Stefanik's empty car. The homunculi might have restrained the killer, whispering warnings into his ears, and when he did not heed these warnings, chomped into his flesh repeatedly until he melted into the snow and dissolved into the bellies of the homunculi, strengthening them for more future good deeds. In this world, Dexter Stefanik lives another couple years, shooting wads where he likes, quivering and coming, driving across the isolated stretch from Oregon to Wisconsin over and over again. Okay, and this poem is also about someone from Unsolved Mysteries, Dottie Kaler. Dottie Kaler. When I think of the afterlife, I think of the version in Beetlejuice, where once you die, you continue a version of your life with your beloved partner stuck in your beautiful beloved house. If you go outside, there's a sandworm, and the sandworm is very scary. It seems it could actually cause you to die in the sense of ceasing to exist. But you can also slam the door on the sandworm, stay in your house, and be safe and static with your love. Death is cozy, hygie even. So as long as your domestic world was good, you'll be okay. If your domestic world happened to be out of whack at the time of your death, though, things would be different. Many women on Unsolved Mysteries have clearly been killed by their husbands. For instance, Dottie Kaler, an agoraphobic woman who rarely left her house. According to her husband, he dropped her off at the BART station and she never came back. The husband speculates that the reason she has disappeared is to get on his nerves and irritate him. It is already clear that despite the presentation of the sequence of events as a mystery, the husband killed Dottie Kaler. And the husband has so normalized his abuse that he does not even realize it's probably unwise to say on camera that your missing wife has probably gone missing just to make things harder for you. This woman's life must have been hell. I want her to have escaped on the BART, but it seems unlikely she was ever even headed to the BART. She was, I assume, killed and therefore trapped in her house like Gina Davis's and Alec Baldwin's characters in Beetlejuice are following their car crash. Except instead of the house being occupied, or it's really like reverse haunted by a New York art world family, it's reverse haunted by her shit husband who killed her, so that she is abused in the afterlife as well as in life. When I was little, I misinterpreted the ending of Beetlejuice. At the credits, we see Winona Ryder asking Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin, who are now her like new parental figures, to levitate her since she's done her homework. They do. She levitates and dances in the air to Harry Belafonte's Jump in the Line, Shake Senora, meaning that everyone is happy in the end. But child me read the levitating dancing itself as somehow the point of the movie. I was confused about how climaxes worked in narrative and was expecting it too late in the film. How could she do that? Was she also dead now? How had she died? This was part of a larger mistake. As a child, I found everything associated with the dead to be frightening, and therefore oscillated between correctly reading Davis's and Baldwin's characters as protagonists and incorrectly reading them as terrifying. The sexiest scene in Beetlejuice is the banana boat song scene, in which the invading queer-coded art world family is trying to serve a fancy dinner to potential funders, but is instead foiled by Davis and Baldwin's newfound ability to harness their otherworldly powers. Baldwin and Davis possess them and make their bodies dance and sing to the Harry Belafonte song. The group dance is erotic. There's an element of otherworldly grotesqueness when their shrimp cocktails become undead hands and grab their faces and push them away. I could not understand why the characters were dancing. I didn't understand the narrative enough to connect it to Barbara and Adam's actions. And so I was left with the characters' embarrassed faces, displaying pleasure and a loss of control at once. It was sex in which the living and the dead are forced to reckon with one another. The background is minor New York City real estate difficulties, as would be the case for much of my future sex life. But this would not be the case for Dottie Kaler's life, which took place in the Bay near the BART, but more precisely within her house, a house I hope she left in death, even if to simply cease, even if her simply ceasing means the rest of us do too. This is a dream in which you are ineffectively surveilled, which James quoted from earlier. At a political meeting, I am told by someone who would know that you should assume the government is reading everything you write and hearing everything you say. If you're putting it on a screen and word and text, whatever, they're collecting it. We can make it harder for them with things like Signal, but the only real obstacle they have to knowing everything you write and say is that there's too much data. That is, the technology to actually sift through all these sounds and words isn't there yet, though they're working on it. And so you should assume everything on a screen is being read and everything you say is being heard. i.e., the abundance of our writing and talking is what interferes with the government's ability to surveil us. The more we write and talk, the better. Your phone is listening in therapy, for instance. It's reading the sadnesses you convey to friends via text or email or on a walk back from the gym or huddled up in a bar corner. It knows all your complaints and desires. And since it's not selective in what it listens to, and hearing the voices of our comrades at meetings discussing communications platforms and arguing about approaches to protesting ICE, it also hears our desire for love. The joke's on them. Capitalism makes people just too lonely to surveil. If we all text each other enough, surveillance will fail. The nurture that our phone notifications provide will cast a spell to create more time. We'd all lie around in a giant king-size bed, fucking in various configurations until someone, getting slightly soft, tried to figure out what was wrong and get back into it, snuck off to the kitchen for water while everyone else continued, tripped over the cat dish and spilled cat food on the floor, etc., then checked their phone and saw something awful was happening. And once everyone had exhausted themselves, our genitals would change back to crotches, to Barbie doll style, non-meaty plastic hinges, allowing us to think more clearly. Desire satisfied, we'd begin to experience more desire. But since we knew the political situation, we would channel that desire, brushing our lips over one another's plastic smoothed over labia and clits until the brushing produced something that was not cum and also not a weapon, but instead a device that embedded us more concretely into ourselves and expanded the time that we would have. We would go to the meeting, we would print the flyers, we would show up to the demos, we would attach ourselves to others, all without losing our jobs, without petting our cats any less frequently, without losing the moment in which we, drifting to sleep, shoot back up, having dreamt ourselves stepping off a surface into nothing, even that dumb moment that we hate, even in the moment itself, feeling our pulses surge with anxiety, even that moment would stay with us as long as we wanted it to. We would do this nightly. We would return home, we would fuck again, we would fall asleep on one another on a couch, we would make food, we would lie in each other's arms, we would talk, we would feel our desire surge, we would fuck, we would come home from work and work more. We would have a capacity for stressful project management tasks. We would fuck some more. Our genitals would oscillate from the form for sexual desire to the form for political desire and back again, over and over, getting wet and not wet, flooding each other's chins and then retracting into little hills. We'd watch a labor documentary together. We'd eat something. We'd fall asleep. Our bodies still intact by days of endless work. And so knowing this is possible, we produce text that is only about love. No one cares to read it. Rudimentary AI skims our texts. Here we are doing push-ups, but here we're thinking about you coming on our faces. Here's an animal. Here's some funny garbage on the street. What are you doing later? Here, look at us and we'll look at you. I put lube on my fingers. I rub my face in an armpit. There are so many of us here, but as though we're dreaming, the scene shifts suddenly. And this one is called 420. Tomorrow is Hitler's birthday. Tomorrow is the birthday of an ex of mine's grandmother. She would never celebrate her birthday on her birthday because Hitler's birthday was, as she said, nothing to celebrate. We'd go to the retirement home on a day that was not her birthday and eat eggs. The food was very good in the restaurant section of the fancy retirement home. Later, she would die there in a place that made good eggs and it had a lovely balcony area where people would sit and visit their relatives, remembering and also not remembering the details of their lives. Once I drove from Charleston, where I went to school, back home to my smaller, shittier hometown, listening to the talking heads very loudly. And whenever I talk to someone also from the South about missing the humidity, this is the moment I think of. Though now I realize that this is just what I said then. I was about to leave the South. Allison, also about to leave, said she'd miss the humidity. I drove 4 hours in AC listening to the talking heads. And now that is the moment I think of when I think of humidity, despite that it was certainly not humid. False confidence when you imagine you're leaving your trauma behind. This is apparently a poem about reverie, a poem that takes the form of reverie, as poems have long done. I used to think I didn't like reverie, but perhaps I was wrong. Garfield thinks he hates Mondays, but really he hates capitalism, as the internet points out. As the internet points out, Garfield thinks he hates Mondays, but Garfield doesn't even work. John works. Garfield hates it when John goes to work because Garfield loves John. So, like Garfield, it turns out I love John. Or I love John, by which I mean I love the mundane and clueless presence in my life. John is all my attachments. John just hanging there thick in the air. John is the food steam I release from my Instant Pot sticking to the walls. The internet has a video of a cicada yelling, "Oh yeah." Also, recently I watched a video that shows a corgi sneaking out to a fence in the cover of night and jumping on the back of a small pony. Then the pony trots along with the corgi riding happily. The people filming and uploading this scene claim that this is what happens when they're not looking, which I hope is true. Perhaps the corgi and the pony were born on Hitler's birthday. Though it's unlikely, perhaps they also know this, that they were born on Hitler's birthday. The pony gives the corgi a ride and they talk about it every day. Otherwise, the corgi and the pony are not personified. They don't understand human things otherwise. They were just born knowing that the date was 420, that Hitler too was born on 420, that Hitler was a fascist leader who killed unfathomable numbers of people. They want to talk about something else as the pony trots around the yard, as the corgi holds on, bobbing. But they have no other thoughts in their little animal brains, and so they don't. The screen of my phone sweats. I picture a cartoon version of planet Earth, but covered in hair. It's time to dream. Okay. And this is called Unsolved Mysteries. Instead of watching Unsolved Mysteries, I go to an experimental music show at a church, where I read a text from my mother, whose hand is dangerously swollen and whose cat has gone missing. I sit in the back. I look at the bench. I want to lay on the bench, but instead I look up at stained glass and the eyes of the figures there. I pray for the cat. Earlier this week, I fucked someone with a silicone dick, while someone else fucked me with a real dick. And, looking in the mirror, I could not help but think of Frank O'Hara's manifesto Personism, in which O'Hara describes his new philosophy, Personism, as putting the person squarely between the poet and the person, Lucky Pierre style, so that the poem is correspondingly gratified. And many years ago now, an undergrad poetry professor explaining Lucky Pierre to me and my classmates, i.e. the Lucky Pierre is the man in the middle of a threesome of men. And the poem is like the man in the middle, the conduit between the writer and the reader. And so now I could verbalize this current scenario, verbalize it in my brain, only as a Lucky Pierre scenario, wherein I was a poem, a conduit, which is also what it feels like if someone is fucking you from behind while you lick the clit of someone lying in front of you, so that each thrust pushes your whole body and moves your fingers deeper into the body of your lover, i.e. you're the relay point in any case. Your experience of the Lucky Pierre is itself mediated by the 60s gay male term for it. You can't get to the fucking without going through Lucky Pierre, without going through poetry, without going through Frank O'Hara. So that the term Lucky Pierre from the Personism Manifesto then is placed between yourself and the experience of the Lucky Pierre, the conduit for thinking about how hot it is to be a conduit, so that your physical body is in the middle, doubly gratified, like the poem is, but mentally you're behind, topping Frank O'Hara's notion of the poem, which is gratified, while it tops the physical scene, the scene in which you are topping and are topped simultaneously. You fuck this amalgam of Frank O'Hara and the Personism Manifesto, your fake dick floating in and out, hugged by text, It is the PDF of the person as a manifesto that you are fucking, and the PDF in turn fucks a scene displayed in a mirror in which your body leans down over your lover, while your other lover behind you catches your eye in the mirror as you thrust into you. The mirror is glass, but the dick of the PDF is swallowed by the padded, mysterious feeling of an interior. The stained glass window in the church with the experimental music show isn't fucking anything. Your prayer for your mother's cat is working. The cat will return the next morning. This church bench has a cushion, where sometimes church benches do not. For religious experiences at church, you are supposed to be uncomfortable, whereas for chill experiences with ambient music, you are usually supposed to be comfortable, your body naturally being the conduit between you and the music, so that this current multi-channel piece you're hearing comes from different parts of the church. Some notes behind you, some in front, some on various sides, making your body feel like it's in space, which is odd and that is obviously already in space and would be in space even if the piece were not multi-channel, but it is multi-channel, and you find yourself simultaneously in a room and pretending to be in a room, playing with your necklace, aware of the body beside you, a body you'll later penetrate, and which will penetrate you, but not simultaneously. There's no metaphor here. You could rub against one another and read a PDF after. This is called There Are Not a Lot of Universes in Which Time Travel is Possible. It's winter 2019. Apparently the very old are waiting to die so that they can live to see the Mueller report. NPR says, some elderly, ill critics of the president say they want to try to hang on to see how it all turns out. For instance, a World War II veteran named Mitchell Tendler began to fade. And his son recounts, it just was quiet for a little while, and then he just sits up in bed halfway and looks at me and he goes, shit, I'm not going to see the Mueller report, am I? And that was really the last coherent thing that he said. Some of these people will, I imagine, live to be disappointed by the Mueller report. And some of them will die without having seen it, disappointed instead by the timing of their deaths. It is a shame when people die at the wrong time. Mark Fisher, January 13th, 2017, in the wake of Brexit and then Trump's election, several months shy of June 8th, when Jeremy Corbyn will do unexpectedly well in the snap election Theresa May calls, upsetting the Conservative majority and also indicating a larger leftward shift. Mark Fisher, presente. You watched the British elections with a new lover who told you everything he knew about the UK as you watched and fooled around and ate seamless and fooled around and watched more. He had planned to sleep over even though you no longer wanted him to, because even as you were rooting for the same thing, there was a gap between you and him. He stayed, you thought about Mark Fisher's death and were relieved when the lover got up in the morning to go to the bathroom, and you were alone in your room, hearing him pee through the bathroom wall, but nonetheless alone. The elderly who are waiting to hear the Mueller report will be cordoned off when they're dead, but they will not even hear the world through a bathroom wall. They won't know any of it. Catherine Lindbergh, my teacher in grad school, who spent her life writing about African-American literature and communism, jumped off a bridge into the Detroit River on December 13th, 2010. Tariq Al-Tayyib Mohammed Bouazizi, a Tunisian fruit vendor, set himself on fire on December 17th, 2010. 4 days later, the flame of his body sparking the Arab Spring after police officers who regularly harassed him confiscated his fruit and the electric scales that he used to use it. Clearly, if you spent your life studying communism and knew that in 4 days someone else's suicide was about to spark a massive political shift, you would not yourself be able to commit suicide. Clearly, if you were Mohammed Bouazizi and knew the effect your immolation would have, you would have to do it anyway, knowing you'd never get to see its effects, which sounds nearly impossible to do. I wish they could have negotiated a trade. If Catherine, Mark Fisher, Mohammed Bouazizi had known when to have hope and when to despair, and collectively saved a body for the three of them to animate together, swapping in and out of it, watching events unfold, channeling their rage into this anchor body that could move in the world if it wanted to, or rest undead and watch things get better and worse, worse, watch suffering and death, watch joy, in patterns that at least are different than those we might have expected, suggesting the possibility of better patterns yet to come. The one brief period in which I regularly engaged in suicidal ideation, I did not want to kill myself, but enjoyed flirting with the idea every day, noting with titillation as the train came how easy it would be to fall in front of it. Whereas normally I tried to avoid thinking about exactly that, and whereas later the thought of the train would not cross my mind at all. In that brief period of suicidal ideation in 2016, my brain played two thoughts over and over again. Why are we still doing this? This being getting up, going to work, everything associated with life, to be honest. And then the response, if you stop doing this, you'd literally never find out what happens next. It's hard to answer why we're all still doing this, but also very easy to answer why you personally are still doing it, to see what everyone else does. The gap between yourself and others, which we might think is a source of isolation, is actually what keeps you wanting to animate your body. It's 2011 and you are getting fingered in a bed that belongs to neither you nor the person fingering you. You've taken a break from the protest. You moan, they return it. Their finger glows ET style, your clit glows back, the glowing finger and the glowing clit becoming vine-like and entangled, becoming animated by something else, pull the two of you back out into the world. In 2019, relatives keep dying. And everyone in your family who has died before 70 has not had money or even a union job like your father did. Your mom's cousin, for instance. You went to visit your mom's cousin's family when you were 10. Your second cousin, a year older than you, had John Connor hair, per Terminator 2, and you watched Doug with him in his room, and your prepubescent body felt a sort of proto-lust. Messy room, skateboarder, John Connor hair. Terminator 2 is a movie about the future and a world in which Skynet, a synthetic intelligence system, has gained consciousness and decided to kill all the humans. In this movie, you can travel back and forth in time, altering things, an ability unavailable to you in real life, so that the proto-lust of a 10-year-old for her 11-year-old second cousin must remain forever encased in a husk. There's no way to jostle it or repurpose it. There's no way to feed it to the souls of the dying and use it to reanimate them. The proto-lust walks in the wood with sticks. It sleeps on an air mattress. It goes away. It returns years later and drives around the Beltway with older teens to watch the Robin Williams movie Jack, about a child who looks like a grown man, which is the metaphor for nothing. And it sits, much younger, in the back of a car as the car speeds along. And then it arrives home, where the two sets of parents reminisce about their parents, some of whom are dead, and joke about family traumas. The proto-lust is encased. It cannot be penetrated. Other lusts can do things. It's summer 2018. You want to fuck someone who is texting you about cheap popsicles usually bought in bulk for children. Like, come over, we're going to watch documentaries and eat popsicles. You know, the shitty ones. Freeze pops in plastic tubes. You go to a public swimming pool and talk about Mark Fisher and also about how this pool wouldn't exist except for the New Deal. Public fucking pools. They would never make that now. As teenagers splash around you. Your prospective lover is reading John Reed's 10 Days That Shook the World. Water is the best feeling. The lover bails on actually fucking afterwards, citing a text received about the illness of a family member. Your lust then exists in the form of a freeze pop, slushed up in a plastic tube. The slush in the plastic tube merges with the slush in the freeze pop plastic tubes of your youth. You're eating a freeze pop in your neighbor's backyard. Your neighbor shows you a secret. She's written the word fuck in marker on the bottom of her shoe. This only increases the power of the freeze pop, which you then make longer, which you then suck on as though it's fingers. It's 2019. You put your fingers into one person as she lays back on the bed, while you ride another person as he too lays back. You make your lover come with one hand. Your forearm hurts. You are sweating. When you pull your finger back out, your fingers are each a freeze pop covered in her fluids. You raise the freeze pop fingers to your mouth to suck the fluids off. But as you do, the plastic part of your fingers dissolves, so that the flesh of the fingers itself, the colored ice, melts into your mouth and you're left without fingers. Okay, you lie in this bed letting people stroke your back while the people with the hardest lives die first. Their deaths are the shitty kind. I was wrong here. You don't get to bottle any of your lust, whether you're 10 or 36. You return months later to the lover who took you to the pool and texted you about shitty popsicles. It's morning and cold out, and you arrive to a sunny apartment and recover from the walkover, excuse yourself to the bathroom to blow your nose, and then enter his room, which has bright yellow sheets. You fuck his face. You look so happy, he says after, and he's not wrong. Thank you.
Thank you all for tuning in today. I'd like to mention that both Peter Inman's 4 books from Roof and Marie Buck's 2 books from Roof are available at SPD. And in spite of the difficulties that SPD is having, SPD is an important and vital part of the poetry community, and it should be supported while they fix their problems, which is, I think, important to do, but something that we should be patient while they do it. Next week, a new pair of curators, Extine W. and Kay Gabriel, will bring their 2-month program of readings. Their first pairing will be the undoubtable Tango Eisenmartin and artist-poet Hannah Black. I look forward to seeing you all here next Saturday at 5 p.m. for Tango and Hannah. And I want to thank you for attending this series I've curated for the past 2 months. It's been a pleasure for me, and I'd like it to continue.